On Press Perspective today, we discuss the biggest headline of the past week. Following the death of a Korean college student in Cambodia, the topic of Koreans being lured into phishing scams in the Southeast Asian country. There's a government-wide response from Korea, but it's much more complicated than just rescuing innocent victims. Do stay with us for more. Welcome to Press Perspective. This week, one story has dominated headlines in South Korea, the death of a college student in Cambodia. The incident has triggered a government-wide response to criminal operations targeting its nationals in the country, including human trafficking and forced involvement in voice phishing scams through torture. A high-level task force led by the Second Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and including officials from the National Police and Intelligence Services is now on the ground in Cambodia. Their investigation is focused on the city of Sihanoukville, where an estimated 1,000 South Koreans currently live. However, the situation is complex. Officials note that while many are victims who have been tortured and confined, some South Korean nationals are also reportedly involved as perpetrators within these criminal networks. Now, to unpack this, we are joined by two guests. To my right, Chloe Bornian, a correspondent of France 24. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And we have Colin Marshall to my left, who have also essayist who studies Korean society closely. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Now, Chloe, I wanted to start with you. From your experience covering international affairs and crime, how common is this type of on-ground involvement by the government to go into a foreign country to get closer look?
Yeah, so as you said, it's interesting to note that there is police forces that are coming to Cambodia, but also the Second Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs was also there on the ground, coming there and discussing with the officials from Cambodian government as well. It's interesting to note that they are coming with two tasks. First one is to discuss the scam campaigns, so that you were speaking about, the one where some South Koreans are involved or at the same time victims and maybe also perpetrators. So this is one of the main goals, is to discuss those. And then the other part is to try and investigate also on the death of the college student, the South Korean college student in August. So how common is it? It's kind of hard to say, but I would say it's probably not that common because it's kind of hard to do. And we can already see it for the task force, South Korean task force. Cambodia has been opening, welcoming them, but in the same time, the one who are supposed to investigate are Cambodian police forces. So the South Korean delegation has to work with the other country as a bilateral forces and in discussion. Cambodia has already expressed that the solution can be found between the two countries, and they've already said that they don't want a third country being involved. We can imagine that they're probably speaking about the United States or the UK, the United Kingdom, because the two countries are also currently targeting very strongly on those scam campaigns from outside of the country, because they're just doing like international sanctions for now. But you can imagine that probably Cambodia is trying to keep its legitimacy here on their terrain. So that's why it's hard to make it a common thing. So then the question would be, often, how common is it in the world? If I take, for example, the example of France, it's probably more common in the sense of France is part of Europe. So we are already obviously working way closer with our neighbors because there is this connection as a political organization together. Most of the thing that France does as a collaboration on international cases is the fight against drug and weapon trafficking, against terrorism as well, because it's quite an important subject in France. Also against cybercrime. So I think the scam that we're speaking about in Cambodia would fall under this kind of cybercrime issues. And we have other transnational examples. If I take just one, I think would be like the International Criminal Court that is prosecuting crimes against humanity in the world. So this is the kind of organization that's also very strongly transnational and trying to make sure that they can operate everywhere in the world. But they are a bit of a different example because they're not a national organizations. They are transnational ones.
Right, and these illicit activities are in Cambodia because they are sort of out of the radar, right? So we do have to consider the country, the location. Now, I wanted to move on to the society aspect. As we talked about, it's been on the headlines for, past week. The news broke out, for the past 2 years. There were times when media covered this, but I do want to ask you, media was a big force in terms of moving the government.
Indeed.
What do you have to say about that?
Indeed, as you say, it's been the top story for quite some time now. And it can look a little unusual, at least to a Western observer, that a news story that is rooted outside the country has been capturing the headlines in this way. Of course, it involves Korean citizens, but if we think about the US, where I'm from, if an American gets in trouble abroad, sometimes it makes the news in a big way, sometimes it doesn't. So yes, the media is an important factor here, the media coverage, but as a reflection as well of public sentiment. And that's a concept that keeps coming up over and over again in my experience, which is very explanatory when talking about the workings of Korean society. Public sentiment being the force, for example, behind the 2016 protests against President Park Geun-hye. We had people being angry in the streets, and that compelled a government response. Now, the response, how much did it have to do directly with what was at issue? Hard to say, but the goal was achieved in the end. Here we have public sentiment about a Korean citizen killed in one way or another abroad. That compels a government response as well. I would actually draw a comparison here with another recent news event that was Korea-related, though it did not happen in Korea. The raid, the immigration raid, the ICE raid on the Hyundai Metaplant America, I believe it was called, in Georgia, in the US. And a lot of the discourse in the Korean media here, or indeed social media discourse, was about how not just anger at that country, not just anger at the US, but anger at the Korean government itself for failing to secure the rights of its citizens abroad. Why don't you make it easier for us to work abroad? What are our assemblymen doing when they're traveling to the US? And there's a little bit of the same reaction here, I've noticed. Why isn't the South Korean government doing more to secure the safety of our citizens abroad? And I think that's one question the government has to save face against right now.
Right, and I think you bring up a good point, but as you said, it's not that easy, right? There's a public sentiment behind it, pushing the governments, but I do want to now focus on the diplomacy aspect. Like Colin mentioned, there's a sort of public outrage, why asking government, but there's also, possibility that there could be an anti-Cambodian sentiment, which is not going to help in diplomacy, right? That's not something that we want to see things unfold.
Yeah, exactly. That's some of the risks that would be here on this, because it's a lot in the media now, so we are seeing it a lot. There have been said that it was some weak law enforcement between South Korea and Cambodia. So all of this is just bringing trust issues from South Koreans towards Cambodia. And it has to be really seen, and the focus should also be put on that for the future. So there is a need for the South Korean government to show that they are here and they are acting, as Colin was saying, showing that they are here to protect their citizens. In the same time, there is also a need to recognize that what's going on in Cambodia is not the fault of Cambodia itself as a country. And as you say, it's a diplomatic issue that's also has to be taken care of, as well as a security issue. Right now, what we can see, for example, is that the travel ban has been implemented by South Korea on 3 of the regions of Cambodia. And the answer from the Cambodian government was, they raised the issue that it might be a bit concerning for tourism, because the truth is, even if we're not only pinpointing some specific areas not to go, the truth is people might not trust anymore the idea of going to Cambodia for now, and there is a relationship that's need to keep going on. And for example, for tourism, why would you choose this country if you're a bit scared? So there is an issue there that has to be quickly seen and quickly followed up. For now, I feel like it's maybe a bit too early to speak about it, but it's something that everyone needs to keep in mind. The relationship between the two countries and all the trust between the two countries can be maybe remade a little, but especially protected.
Right. And Colin, going back to now about the public sentiment.
Yes, indeed.
I wanted to focus on sort of the collective psyche, right? That's the kind of term for the society. And you're obviously pretty good at explaining this in terms of in words, right?
We'll see.
So what's the anxiety behind this?
Well, there are a number of currents this taps into. One of them that comes to mind right away is a phenomenon I've noticed since I've been living in Korea, 10 years, but it's been going on longer. The popularity of Southeast Asia as a tourist destination. Not so much Cambodia, but including Cambodia. Vietnam is the big one, of course. More and more Koreans go there each year. But you know, it's in your own backyard here in this corner of Asia. It's one of the closer. Southeast Asia is accessible. It's accessible and it's exotic to Koreans and it's cheap. And there's a whole culture of enthusiasm around travel to Southeast Asia. But the other current is that, you know, it's comparatively unsafe. Let's face it, especially when you compare it to South Korea specifically. Now, of course, Koreans have many complaints about public safety in Korea, but when a foreigner visits, including when an American visits, they're always impressed by just how safe it is here. And this, I mean, growing up in a society like South Korea can have a certain, how to put it, a desensitizing effect. There are jokes in Korean TV shows and films and novels about Koreans going abroad to a country like Cambodia or Thailand or Vietnam and immediately getting their luggage stolen because they leave it at a cafe when they go up to the bathroom and then they come back and all their stuff is gone. So there's a certain, I don't know if you would say a trusting quality, just a sense of a lack of an awareness of danger that may come up with growing up in a society like Korea where things are comparatively safe. And I think that vulnerability or the feeling of vulnerability on the part of South Koreans is a theme here. It's something this story keys into, like, oh, I knew we'd stand a chance of getting robbed in Southeast Asia, but oh, we could actually get killed. We could get kidnapped. You know, this is a nightmare scenario. And yes, it's only one case, but I mean, it makes a big difference. Cambodia is now a country where a Korean could be kidnapped and killed, which is much different than a country where that's never happened. Even though, yes, it's not likely to happen to you, that makes a psychological shift. It flips a switch about the Korean perception of this particular country.
Right, and it's not safe for us to let it, you know, without facts, right? So I wanted to talk about Europe. This news sort of made not headlines, but it was reported across the world. How is Europe perceiving this? I know Southeast Asia is also a traveling spot for a lot of Europeans as well.
Yeah, it is. The thing is, the European media, what they've been reporting on is obviously through the lens of South Korean, because it's mostly South Korea that's been recently showing and making the headlines. They're also, you know, remembering that there are a lot of other nationalities as well there, and so that they are scamming a lot of other countries as well. What I saw mostly in the news from the European perspective is they are speaking a lot also about the United States and the United Kingdom actions, because what's been done by those two countries is mostly sanction against the Southeast Asia-based multinational crime. So it's in Cambodia, but they're not always Cambodian citizens. And they are like, you know, deciding to do financial sanctions. That's what has been done. There have been like stopping their actions. They've been putting the money like on blocking the money in the banks, and they are saying that through investigations that are currently going on, they're saying that those scam rings in Cambodia, but also in Myanmar and other countries, were making up to $70 billion a year worldwide. These kind of scam centers. So I think like European countries and medias have been mostly focusing on how big this kind of scam centers are actually becoming and how much of a threat for everyone it can become and can be. And, you know, reaction from the South Korean government is being watched, because it's also for other countries maybe thinking that they might also have to do something in the future about that.
Right, and you do bring up a good point. It's not just Cambodia, right? Like the people that are carrying out these illegal activities are not Cambodians only, right? I mean, so going to that point, some Koreans obviously have been looked at as perpetrators, but it kind of blew up because there were victims, innocent ones, that were lured with saying that you'll get a high-paying job, this is an opportunity. And some of these young Koreans having to travel, taking the risk and traveling to Cambodia. What does that say about the society in Korea?
Yeah, you know, some of these fake jobs, they even pay the airfare for Koreans coming here. So they do invest in the scams, these organizations. They try to make their money back in the worst ways possible, but they really are serious about luring Koreans over sometimes and other nationalities. But it makes me think of the way that many of my own countrymen came to Korea. I never did it myself, but of course many Americans come here and teach English. And you know, they never have a nightmare scenario like this happen to them, but many of them get here and they're quite unsatisfied with the conditions that they find themselves teaching in. And they sometimes feel like they have been deceived to one degree or another. Not so much anymore, maybe 10, 20 years ago, you know. People who came from America to teach at Hagwon, they're sort of promised the world, and that's not quite the experience they get when they come. But in any case, among South Koreans, we can draw a parallel by saying, you know, many Americans who come and teach English in Korea, they do so because perhaps they feel their prospects in the home country are not that good. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but they figure why not strike out into the wider world and do something that where the bar to entry is low, but maybe I can get some money, I can get myself going. In a similar way, young Koreans now, I think many of them feel, rightly or wrongly, that maybe they don't have great prospects ahead of them to sort of get on the ladder, get on the socioeconomic ladder to sort of get a decent job, enough to pay the bills, enough to buy a house eventually. So you might as well strike out, go to Cambodia, why not? And just roll the dice. So I think there is a bit of that, a sense of, oh, at home, I'm not sure what my chances for success really are. I think the prospects have begun to look dimmer for a lot of Koreans, and that raises the chance they'll take more of a risk and just see if they can make their fortune elsewhere with good results sometimes, less good many times.
Right, right. And after, you know, obviously they're lured. You know, we're not going to go into details, but there's been some very disturbing videos that's been online. So you've already touched on this. I wanted to ask you, Chloe, like that there's like $70 billion in this industry, phishing worldwide. So what does it say about today's, you know, aspect in terms of phishing and trafficking, right? How has it changed over the years?
Yeah, that's, as you say, I think it's what's putting a light also on it is all they've been gathering people, or they've been coercing people, and what they're doing as a scam. So we're speaking here about this crime companies that are really well organized. So as you were saying, and as Colin was saying as well, what they were doing, the model is they have like forced labor camps all over in Cambodia, in Myanmar, in other countries. So the workers all load in with fake jobs. As you were saying, sometimes they even have like plane tickets taken in so that, you know, the trust is building so that you do believe you're going for a job offer. And then people are there held against their will. That's from what we know for now. It's happening. They're being scammed. They have to stay, and now they have to work under the threat of torture. And they have to carry out an online fraud that is, you know, against victims all over the world. And that's also why I was speaking about it a bit before. There are a lot of South Koreans, there are other nationalities as well, because this kind of scam is actually touching everyone. And the model is developing in a very disturbing way on a very big scale. So what they're doing is what they call the pig butchering scam. So it's actually one person will be getting into a conversation through fake social media accounts, and they'll choose their victim, find their victims, and through a long time, actually, they're putting a lot of time, a lot of effort through multiple accounts. They pretend to be making a relationship with the person in a way or another. Then most of the time what it gets to is you'll get convinced by your scammer to invest in some kind of cryptocurrency platform. And once the person does this, the platform does disappear, and the person, the scammer you were talking to, disappears as well. So people get left with no money and a sense of not understanding what really happened. Because that's the thing, online scam is very hard to understand, and it's sometimes, you know, technology is sometimes hard to follow. So for some of the people who get scammed, this is a big, you know, and part where you end up with no money and not understanding what's going on, and no one can really help you. So I feel like international fraud through this kind of model is really rising, and that some experts are actually saying that this is the kind of scam that we currently have to be very careful about, and putting more maybe public awareness also on this kind of scam.
Right, right. And it's not just in South Korea where these are prevalent, right? In the U.S. as well. It's made news for
in the U.S. too, although somehow the case that comes to mind is actually a French one where a woman recently was conned into believing that Brad Pitt was contacting her and wanted to marry her, and she gave him the better part of $1 million. This scammer that was pretending to be Brad Pitt. But yes, although voice phishing itself is really, I think of as a Korean phenomenon. And in Korea, you see, comedy sketches about it, and the gag men pretending to be acting as the scammers always put on broad Chinese accents. I mean, the perception here is it's a Chinese thing. And indeed, you read about this story. It happened in Cambodia, but the 3 individuals charged with responsibility in the murder of the student, Chinese, and the head of this syndicate, I guess you'd call it, Prince Group, that runs many of these sort of fishing farms, voice fishing farms, is a Chinese Cambodian. And I think for many Korean readers and viewers of this, followers of this news story, this is in alignment with expectations. It's seen as a Chinese thing, and I think anti-Cambodian sentiment is not so much of a risk, just because people can look a little into the story, and I think they see what's going on.
Right, right, and it's. There's a lot into this, right? Different countries, and we're trying we don't have enough time to talk about everything, but that's all the time we have, unfortunately. Thank you, Colin, for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Chloe, for your insight.
Thank you very much.
Now that concludes today's edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.